Commissioner, you're exactly right. The problem is it's difficult because the airport has some value as an airport. It'll have more value as we bring more utilities, more infrastructure out there. So one of the benefits, although it may be, I won't mislead you, maybe several years before this actually comes to fruition, is by being part of the freight logistics zone with Gulf County and Gadsden County. I forget the name of the county to the north, not Gadsden, but whatever the county is up north. With them working at both ends, we have the ability to be some partner of some side uses as they get the port and the rail connection to I-10 up and running. We have more land down here that could be accessed. And so we're looking at trying to see what we can do in partnership with the port. That's our closest, sort of point of employment, and see what we can do over here as they move forward their port. I wish we could find some standalone enterprise to come into the airport, but in this complicated, interconnected world these days, you get part if somebody else is doing something else nearby. So we're just trying to find out who's going to come nearby and what can we do here in Franklin County.
They building computers every day. All you got to do is put a big building out there, build some computers and ship them out.
You need a skilled labor force, Commissioner, and that's another challenge.
Mr. Chairman, and you have to remember, that's what Gulf County is pouring all their money into, is restore money into, is the port.
That's correct.
So, and they are keeping in the back of their head that Apalachicola and Franklin County has the airport here.
That's correct.
So, I mean, that's all part of the big regional picture.
Right.
That's right. And there was another piece of that puzzle I didn't even know existed till last Thursday at the ARPC meeting. That's the fact that Gulf County is presently involved, or they're part of Panama City's international freight zone.
Yes.
And Tallahassee is in the process now of trying to get that approved for their area, and we would be a part of it. Where it makes a difference is if the FLZ was working today, Gulf County, people that bring stuff into Gulf County could not pay their taxes on something until
federal import duty.
But if it come through Franklin, since we're not part of an international freight zone, they would have to pay them.
Right. Now, we signed up to be part of Tallahassee, so we're waiting for Tallahassee to finish their application.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they're working on
Yeah.
it. So I didn't even know that existed. So anyway, I'm catching up to speed.
Yeah, we did that right before
Yes.
Commissioner Jones got on. We approved that for Tallahassee.
Any more comments from Mr. Puckett? Thank you for coming in today and giving us an update.
Yes, sir. Y'all have a great Thanksgiving.
You too.
Same to you.
Next will be Mr. Kirk Blair, TDC Administrator Report.
Good morning, Commissioners. Glad you're feeling better, Commissioner Sanders. We're glad to have you back.
Yes, I was quite sick, I can tell you.
My report's a little longer today. I apologize. We've got a few action items. Before I get into the numbers, I wanted to tell you that, one of the things that we don't see locally very often and you don't see is the work that 2K is doing on our internet marketing. So in your folder that's in your, whatever that archive folder is that Michael puts together, is a marketing strategy for the coming year, which will show you some of the markets, show you what the ads look like, what the coverage looks like. So I, excuse me, I encourage you to take a look at that because we don't see that. That all goes out in Internet Netherland, but they've done a good job on it. Numbers. August was amazing. As you may have noticed, we were up 47% in August. I really don't believe that that's truly reflective of the August numbers. We were down in other months, even in July. So those are likely numbers that come from late postings of a previous month. We just never know. We just get the check from DOR, and we are unfortunately not able to explain all of the ups and downs. But what it means overall, though, is that we're now at about 3.6% increase over last year. And you'll remember that we keep running pretty closely at about 7%. We'll see what happens in September to see how close we get to that. We've been concerned that some of the months weren't, especially in the spring, and then again this summer with with weather issues, that some of the months weren't going to be as high as they usually are. So we're encouraged that we're back on the plus side, and we'll see what September's numbers look like. Once again, the issue of lack of information from DOR really puts us in a difficult position, not only in understanding the fluctuations in the market, but in making projections. Also limits us in terms of monitoring who's collecting tax, who isn't collecting tax. And I mentioned to you a couple of months ago that we've been having discussions with the tax collector about possibly collecting the tax locally instead of having DOR collect them. And Mr. Watson has indicated to us that he would be willing to consider that and is looking at it probably in the spring. So I'll have more to say on that. But in addition to that, our board, in this constant effort to struggle with the lack of numbers and the ability to make projections and monitor and know even how many people we get in the county, passed a motion last week to have you consider. They would like to consider a lodging provider licensing program. This would be basically like an occupational permit for lodging, only for lodging providers. You know, this industry now is 60% or more of our economy, and we just don't know enough about what's going on in the industry. And this would allow us to set up a regulatory program locally, not only to collect the data about those lodging providers that we already know about and that are paying the tax, but I have reported before to you that in the last 2.5 years, the number of people that are listing their homes on, specifically on VRBO, have increased about 400%. We've now got 400 or 500 units on VRBO, and while Airbnb has worked out an agreement with the Department of Revenue to collect the tourist tax from those individuals who are renting units in their facilities, VRBO has not. And when we were only running at 30 or 40 VRBO units, we didn't think it was a significant enough market to make a difference. But now that we're up over 400, there's a lot of room there for people that, if they're not having their property managed by one of the local management companies, to just not be paying both tourist tax and sales tax. So that means not only the 2% that the tourist tax generates, but then the 3% that you all get from state sales tax, we don't collect. And finally, you know, there's a health and safety issue. We don't, know that these people, have met regulatory requirements, that they've met the health and safety requirements. So our board is looking to get your guidance. They would like to work on a proposal to bring back to you about a licensing program for lodging companies. It would be a nominal fee, something like $50 a unit would cover the cost of conducting the program. It would allow us to make sure everybody that's renting out their units has paid their fee, and therefore then identify them, and it then allows us to follow up to make sure that they're collecting the tax and that they're meeting their health safety standards. So that was the first thing they approved last meeting and asked me to present to you and get your support to investigate putting together such a program.
One question I got, Curtis, it says the possibility of instituting a licensing or registration program. Now you keep referring this morning to licenses, so y'all done away with the registration. It says licenses or registration program. I mean, explain that to us.
I guess it's a matter of semantics, and I'm not sure I know the significant difference between the two. Essentially, it's to get them to register the number of units that they have and that they're doing business in the county. If they don't, obviously there would be consequences. So to that extent, it would have consequences to it. Presumably, they would have to show their registration or license. I think all of that would be flushed out as our board works on what they would bring back to you to, propose.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Kirk, what the other places are doing over the state about this?
Easily half of the tourist development, the counties that have levied the tourist development tax collect their tax locally. And we have not, because until we met, frankly, the $1 million mark, it just didn't make sense for us to spend what would be required to collect the tax locally and make sure that people are, are filing their reports. So, we're right on the cusp right now. We're at $1.2 million. It begins to, start making sense that it'll pay for itself. Licensing is, rather registration, whichever, we go with, is a different issue. But most of the counties, the larger ones certainly, the charter counties in the state, have an occupational licensing program, which we do not. So their lodging companies are included in their occupational license. And so they have the ability to collect information from them, require that they meet state and federal standards, and, which we do not.
What about the county that's similar to our side?
Smaller counties, likely or not. I mean, it's when you're, the counties that we work with frequently, like Gadsden, Jackson, Washington, they collect so little in taxes that, in tourist tax, that it just doesn't pay them to, to spend a lot of effort on following up on the, those people that are paying the tax. And, but, we're one of the larger of the smaller counties in terms of collections, so we're getting to the point of it becoming an issue to us.
Okay.
Mainly tracking the VRBO.
Largely, yes. I mean, the Airbnb's paying tourist tax, but they're not being monitored in terms of, some of them are renting units in spare bedrooms, some of them have mother-in-law units, some of them have, I mean, there's just no consistency with regards to what they're renting, and nobody's looking over their shoulder in terms of, making sure that they have, they meet health and safety standards. There are a whole lot of issues about zoning issues that are raised with Airbnbs. So, they would be a good group to have some oversight on as well.
Any other comments from the board? Attorney's advice? Seems like to me we probably need to have a public hearing on this issue before we direct somebody to go and set this program up. Seems like to me it'd be beneficial to have public input on this.
Yeah.
Commissioner?
What I would like to see is basically a workshop or a public hearing or whatever, but to bring the two different, I think what you said, one was to, bring all the information back to where we can kind of have a better understanding of what all directions we need to go in. And like I said, the reason why we put that on hold, talking about the collections, was because at that time you were not able to get a hold of the clerk. And the clerk, like I told you, was the finance person for the county, so as you well know, Kirk. But I would make a motion that we have a workshop to discuss this with TDC.
Commissioner?
And it would give Kirk time enough to come back with some information.
We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Sanders, second by Commissioner Lockley. Any further discussion?
Yeah, make sure it be advertised to all the people who gonna be involved.
All your lodging providers?
Yeah, and the ones who doing this small thing especially, so we can see hear both sides of the story.
Commissioners, if I might, we're probably earlier than we need to be on a public workshop at this point, but I think what we're requesting, we didn't want to spend a lot of time on this unless you acknowledge that, it'd be worthwhile. What might be work for you is that we'll bring back to you an outline of a proposal that then you can talk about and decide whether you want to go to a workshop on it. I don't think I was looking for a workshop yet, but
That's not what I said.
Okay.
You know, my thing is, we just need the information to make a decision, Mr. Kerr. You know, you can do a proposal all you want to, but it may not be the proposal we want,
Okay.
so.
So do we want the TDC board to continue doing what they're doing?
Well, it seems like they've done a lot without me being there on last meeting, but, you know, that I was not aware of, but, I thought we had I thought you was gonna iron this out with, the clerk, he was gonna iron this out with the clerk and the tax collector to see what was gonna go on with that, and then this other with the VRBO. The big question is with the VRBO is enforcement, and who's gonna do the enforcement? And that's what I'm saying, we need the answers to those questions before we can even look at some kind of stuff. How do we wanna do it? Are we gonna have to hire us another staff person to handle the VRBOs and the B&Bs, or bed and breakfasts? I don't know. But is TDC gonna do it through the management of Allen and Associates? Don't know. So, like I said, we need to just hammer this out a little bit. It's gonna take more than just one meeting to do it, because this is a big thing. How many, you said, what, 400?
400.
Around 400 rental properties? I listen to the meeting. But, that's a lot of properties you're talking about. So, I mean, that's, what I'm saying is, we need to know about the enforcement side of it, and I'm like, Commissioner Jones and Commissioner Lockley, how does the other counties do it? So, you know,
So
I just got a motion for a workshop.
with no date or anything on it?
No, I mean, they'll have to work with Michael Morone to.
Whenever you get ready to bring back something, but what I was trying to prevent is to have them do 2 or 3 or 4 months worth of studies and then come back and then we don't like it.
That's right.
You know what I'm
that's right.
saying? What he's asking us is, do we want him to move forward with it?
But we don't
We
know.
don't know what we're moving forward with.
That's right. That's what I'm
So-
saying.
Kurt, we do have a motion and a second on the floor to have a workshop at some point.
Well, and maybe at that workshop, we can clearly see how we need to go. We can listen to everybody and see how we need to go. And we need to have the tax collector here to see what his positions are. I mean, we're gonna have the collections, we're gonna have the VRBOs and the B&Bs here, so we need to be able to do that. But I think we just need to have a workshop to clearly see what direction we need to go on, because some people do not understand everything about all this. I know I don't understand everything about it, because I'm not in the vacation rentals.
Right. We do have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor? All opposed? That motion carries. I would suggest that the workshop be after the first of the year sometime, which would give Kurt more time to go back to another meeting with his board and just and then we'll set up a workshop sometime after the first of the year.
But, Mr. Chairman, that does not preclude the TDC from looking at all this. And, I mean, we're always looking at everything. So, so anyway.
During that meeting, they gonna present they stuff too, right? I guess.
During the workshop?
Yeah, you gonna present your stuff during that workshop, right?
I would expect.
We'll set it up sometime after the first of the year, which will give him time to come up with a proposal and look at some of the different aspects of what he's proposing.
That way we can hear your side, their side,
From what he's heard
Everybody.
here.
You know,
everybody's side.
you're absolutely right that, I mean, we've got a lot of work to do. We need to work with legal, we need to work with the clerk's office, we need to work with the tax collector. We just wanted to make sure you understood we were going down that road, so that it wasn't a surprise and we're all on the same
Mr.
page.
Chairman, if I may, I think, Mr. Kurt, too, us just having that workshop type environment will allow us to all know how we really do need to proceed. Because things might come up there that we're not gonna know about, and you're not gonna know about, but somebody else might know about. So I think it's gonna be beneficial.
Well,
Go ahead.
excuse me, what I was saying, one thing too, if you decide to go on the tax collector's side of it, because we've got the Department of Revenue taking, collecting, dispersing it to the county now. If you have the tax collector doing it, is he gonna have to have an extra person to take up the tax? So, yeah, I mean, and then like I said, the enforcement side of it. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of questions that has not been answered that we need answers to before we move ahead.
He might have to have a prison, then we might have to have a code enforcement,
Right,
all that.
right.
I don't know. Got to have blue with that stuff.
Okay, Kurt, move forward.
Okay, next one. Commissioners, we've had a couple of changes on our board in the last couple of months. Mayor Van Johnson has been designated as the representative for the TDC board from the city of Apalachicola. Most of the other organizational appointments remain the same. We do have a vacancy that was brought about by Walter Armistead's decision not to be appointed for a second term. I provided you in your packet a copy of the advertisement we ran for 3 weeks, and we received one applicant, and that's the form of Kathy Robinson from Robinson Real Estate. She meets all of the requirements of the as a lodging provider, which was the criteria we needed to meet on this position, and the board is recommending her to fill that position.
Pleasure of the board. Do you need action from the board, Kurt?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Pleasure of the board on that
Motion to
appointment.
accept.
We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Jones. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lockley. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have some.
Mhm.
Now, is this just for Ms. Robinson, or is this also for Mayor Johnson?
I mean, technically, you can approve the designation of the city's representative.
Okay.
You ultimately approve the appointments
Right.
and all of the appointments. But we have very little to say about those that are recommended by the cities, so
So, I'm not trying to get us in the weeds, I'm just being
Yeah.
clear, Mr.
it would be appropriate.
Okay. I'd like to amend my motion to reflect both of them.
Including Mayor
Yeah,
Johnson?
that's right.
You mean your second, Commissioner Lockley?
Yeah, can I ask the lawyer a question?
Yes.
Mr. Shute,
Yes, sir.
will that be all right? He said them were one person put in for it, so we doing all right to accept that?
Yes, sir, you have the discretion to accept the appointment. I haven't looked at the procedure that they went through, but you don't have any process in place that requires that you have multiple people apply for the appointment for this board or any other board. And typically, we're grateful to accept the service of people that are willing to serve and be dedicated.
Okay.
We do have amended motion and amended second to include Mayor Van Johnson along with Mr. Robinson. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All opposed? The motion carries.
The board did take your suggestion about reviewing the sustaining grant program, and we'll be working on that, as well as reviewing some of the provisions of the small promotional grant program that we've got in place. And I would expect that our board will be covering both of those issues at their January meeting. In regards to the one sustaining grant program for which we do not have a contract, our board considered the discussion that this board had about the Dixie Theater. They heard a presentation from Dixie at our last board meeting. I think the important thing was that our board realized that the Dixie Theater is an iconic establishment in the community, and Ms. Partington indicated that they would conform to the terms of the contract that required that they be open for 20 hours a week, year-round, 4 hours a day, which was the requirement of all of the nonprofits that receive sustaining grants. Dixie did indicate that they are changing the makeup of their season, but that and we'll see performances throughout the year, but that does not particularly impact on the requirement that they stay open 20 hours a week. And so given that discussion, the TDC board recommended that you all execute the contract with the Dixie Theater. We will be reviewing all of the programs in this review of the sustaining grant program that we're beginning in January with an eye towards whether any of those existing programs either no longer need sustaining grants, whether there are some that will always need sustaining grants, whether there's a possibility that new ones can come in. I think the board, it's been a long time, it's been 10 years since this program was established, and I think the board recognizes that, it may have served the purpose for what it was doing for the last 10 years, but might need to be revised significantly. And so obviously this program would be one of those that would be included in that review, and we would expect to have those decisions done by the end of the fiscal year in time for, whatever the program would look like for next fiscal year.
Kurt, when you're referring to the 20 hours a week, 4 hours a day, year round, is that something else that will be reviewed as you're looking at the policies and procedures for these sustaining grants and
Absolutely.
should that still be required of certain entities or not be required? I mean, is it, in your review, will you be looking at a total review of the sustaining grant program?
Yes, we're going to be looking, absolutely. The requirements that we have with the sustaining grant recipients, remember back, maybe we don't remember, back in 2007-8 when Commissioner Putnam recommended that we do this program, we didn't have the industry that we have now. In those days, we were lucky to have anything opened in the off-season because we just didn't have enough visitors. But we've made our tourist industry has doubled in that amount of time. So the needs are different. And our board's going to be looking not only at whether they need the money, whether they don't need the money, what requirements that we ought to impose on it. Maybe we don't call it a sustaining grant program anymore. Maybe we call it a substantial grant or something, But they're going to look at all of it to see what seems to be appropriate now.
Well, I mean, I know over the years that Dixie's done a lot. They presented a lot of programs for the community, and people would come in, eat at restaurants, go to the plays. I mean, that's a good program. I'm not going to get into the weeds of y'all's review and all that because Commissioner Sanders is our representative on your board, so I don't really know everything that goes on with that. But if she meets the requirements, and I'd like the board to move forward with this and give her the funding she needs to continue for this year.
That's what we would recommend.
I'll make the motion to do that.
We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Jones. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lockley. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All opposed? That motion carries.
Next item is we're working on our visitor's guide. We haven't revised the visitor's guide for 2.5, 3 years now. It's out of date. We're almost out of visitors' guides. We expect we've got enough to get through this winter, and we'll probably run out to, in spring. So we're redoing it, and that will require printing. The visitor's guide gets placed on our website, but we still do print a good number of them and would expect to print about 50,000 of them. We distribute those through the welcome centers throughout the state, the visitor centers. Through our website, people contact us to ask for copies of them. They're very attractive books. Our board has considered a possibility of this year selling ads. You have in your packet today a proposal by Bay Media that would sell enough ads to cover the cost of printing the guide. And I just wanted to bring you up to date on that. I'm working with the clerk's office to work out the details of how all that would work, and collections and payments and that sort of thing. And I'll be sitting down with Michael when we get far enough along and to talk about whether there are any legal ramifications. But we just wanted you to know that we're moving in that direction, and be happy to answer any questions you might have about it.
I was going to suggest that the attorney be involved at some point.
I try not to bother him, but I do call him frequently.
Okay, move forward.
Triumph, you remember that one of the things the legislature did last year was to add tourist development councils as potential recipients of Triumph money. That was a new wrinkle to the whole thing. We talked about it at our last board meeting, They asked that I go ahead and look at the possibility of developing a proposal that would be directed at tourism infrastructure, since that is an area that we seem to be in need of. We didn't expect to get in under the November 15th deadline, but we're of the opinion that we'll put together a proposal and submit it for consideration the next time that they will be looking. We'll bring a proposal back to you as long as it's okay with you to go ahead and proceed. And, before we submit it, we'll bring it back to you